For the Investing News Network, I am Brian McGovern. With me today to discuss psychedelic investments is Matt Carr, Chief Trend Strategist at the Oxford Club. Matt, I really appreciate your time today.
Always my pleasure to be here. Thanks, Brian.
Why don't we start with your impressions on the sector so far? We're about 1 year removed from MindMed hitting the public markets. I'm wondering if you could tell us a bit about sort of what has interested you the most about the sector and what are you most excited about?
So for me, I'm very excited about this because one of my favorite areas to cover is cannabis, and I've been doing so basically since as long as that market has been legal. Right now, the psychedelic medicine market feels like the cannabis market a decade ago, right? We're just at these nascent, very early stages. And psychedelic medicine is a very interesting opportunity. This is something that humans have been consuming for thousands of years, all the way back, 9,000 BC. We've been using, mushrooms or psilocybin or some sort of hallucinogen. The Aztecs, the Celtic Druids, they all used something. So this is a part of human history that has been with us for a very long time. Now, in the past, we've used this for, maybe spiritual journeys or something recreational like a trip. But what we found just over the last several decades is that there's actually real medical benefits from these drugs, either through LSD or through magic mushrooms and psilocybin. And that's paving the way for kind of like a new era in medicine. And so for me, I think cannabis is that leading edge of the revolution that we've seen just over the past decade. This next wave is going to be psychedelic medicine, which is expected to be a $100 billion global market just by the end of the next decade, which would make it larger than the US cannabis market, legal cannabis market by 2030. So that's what I find to be really, really interesting and fascinating. Now, like I said, using psychedelics has been around for a long time. There were studies done in the 40s and 50s. We had Timothy Leary, in the 60s, MK Ultra from the US government, which actually I have 3 paintings in my house based on the redacted MK Ultra reports that were released. So this is something that has been explored, but now we're actually seeing that it is going to come to market and help people with really serious health issues around the world.
Matt, you mentioned your experience covering the cannabis sector. I'm curious if you can eliminate a little bit about the parallels that maybe you've seen in the investment trends between these two markets. Cannabis has been around for a bit longer now and has been able to develop a lot of different sectors. With psychedelics at a sort of early stages starting point, maybe have you seen comparison points between the two at similar starting points?
Right. Well, so the one benefit right now in psychedelic medicine is that the number of players is very small. Right? There's not a ton of companies. There's still not a huge number of publicly traded cannabis companies, but the number of actually psychedelic medicine companies are very minimal. So that this is a great opportunity for investors to come in and get educated about the market, because you can look at a company like Compass Pathways, which received FDA approval, breakthrough therapy designation for its COMP360. That is the largest player. So I'd put like Compass Pathways, compare that to maybe Canopy growth in the cannabis sector. Compass trades for around $45 at the moment, $1.6 billion market cap, is the largest player and has the most backing. MindMed is you're kind of like your second largest, $842 million. So you have these kind of two players. But what's fascinating here, with the parallel here, is that medicinal push. So cannabis had its first footholds into moving towards legalization through that medical side. We saw that in California, we saw that in Canada, and that medical legalization has spread here across the United States to 36 states. You're seeing psychedelics have those first kind of footholds taking place right now. Denver decriminalized magic mushrooms, Oakland, then Santa Cruz. I said last year that election day here in the United States, that no matter who won the White House, cannabis would be the biggest winner because of the number of states that would expand legalization. That happened. What kind of fell underneath the radar there was that Oregon and Washington, D.C. passed laws on decriminalization. Colorado plans to introduce, or activists want to have something introduced by next year to do the same. California has already introduced a bill this year looking to decriminalize psilocybin and some other psychedelics. And then you also had the state of New York just this week, yet an assembly person introduce a bill doing the same. So those are those real initial parallels. That's that legalization market that is just starting to happen. That legalization market is opening up to more research. And for me, psychedelic medicine has its biggest upside at the moment treating treatment-resistant depression, TRD. This is something that affects more than 100 million people worldwide. We've seen from studies that treating patients with psilocybin had a 4 times larger effect than with traditional, medicines that are on the market. So that's why you saw these breakthrough designations from the FDA. So that's where I see the two markets kind of branching off from that same point, that medicinal foothold. I still believe for cannabis in the long run, the medicinal market will be much larger than the recreational market, because there's so many different ways to use cannabinoids and the endocannabinoid system in our bodies. And I think psychedelic medicine, it will follow that same path. You're going to find all of these uses because of the things that they impact in our brain, like serotonin and the prefrontal cortex.
I see. Now, Matt, you did mention that there's a limited number of companies at the moment. However, it does feel like we're starting to see this ramp up of new listings, new companies interested in listing, and more of an investor appetite. I'm wondering if you could tell us a bit about some of the metrics or some of the ways that you've started to see that are effective in differentiating these companies, and how to really find an edge in between comparing these companies.
So right now it is kind of very hard. And again, it's going to be going back to there's initial launches of cannabis. There's not a lot of companies that have a lot of revenue at the moment. These are like biotechs. So you're looking at this sector the same as you would a biotech. They're going to be losing money. They're not going to be making money at the moment. You just want to make sure that those losses are kind of being reined in over the next couple of quarters or over the next year. Be okay with those. And you want to make sure that there is a clear pathway for their treatments. Like that's where I believe Compass has kind of the edge at the moment. This is why their shares are a little bit more of a premium than a company like MindMed. MindMed has 2 sort of treatments that they're exploring. But I think depression, TRD, is going to be number 1. You're then going to see it going for anxiety, PTSD, and then ultimately treating some form of opioid addiction, or any other kind of addiction, from nicotine to alcoholism. So those are the kind of metrics that I look for, is that way to the market. Because the other thing we kind of have to understand, and again, that's why I use this comparison to the cannabis industry about a decade ago, is these are still considered Schedule I drugs here in the United States at the federal level. That creates a lot of problems for research, as we've seen in the cannabis sector. But that as we continue to pick up this path of legalization, that kind of helps. There are institutes that are doing studies here in the United States. That's the one benefit that cannabis really didn't have a decade ago, that you have Johns Hopkins, you have these other institutes plowing millions of dollars into this research, and the FDA giving like these designations. So that's the bright side. But right now, this you're going to have to look at these as biotechs, because essentially that is what they are. These are companies that are looking to disrupt this $8.5 trillion healthcare industry. And it's going to be a process. It's going to be a slow process, but this is something I think if you can position yourself for now, 5, 10 years from now, you're really going to appreciate that.
I see. And Matt, as a bit of the last thing, you highlighted a lot of these sort of state-based legalization victories for the sector. Are there any other sort of catalysts or specific events that you feel like will trigger even more of a momentum for the space, or even more of an awareness, or boost that sentiment that we're starting to slowly see?
Well, I think as you see states here, and I can speak from the U.S. level, as states begin legalization, that becomes its own catalyst. We saw here in the United States, making the comparison to cannabis, once Colorado and Washington legalized adult use, acceptance of cannabis skyrocketed 20 points here across the country. And from those, that was only in 2012. And then after that, every single election, more and more states began to legalize cannabis or make moves. Other states that had not made any sort of effort then developed one. So I think that's the biggest catalyst. So if Colorado can introduce something in 2022, if California and New York can both pass something statewide, that is again going to start picking up that momentum, just as we've seen in the cannabis sector.
Perfect, then. We'll have to wrap it up there. But Matt, thank you so much again for your expertise and your time.
Hey, no problem. I'm always happy to be here.
Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel for even more interviews. For the Investing News Network, I'm Brian McGovern, and we'll see you next time.